Well, it's a real pleasure to be here. We cannot begin any talk at this conference without first celebrating the cohesion that Europe and the democracies throughout the world have shown in recent weeks in support of Ukraine. And all our previous speakers have done that. The events make it necessary in some sense to change the shift of some of the focus of some of my remarks. I would like to add my perspective on some of the broader aspects of cohesion by examining cohesion through a historical, academic, and economic lens. I hope this can help to find greater unity in the other battles we face, including the current and future pandemics, climate change, and the deep inequalities within countries, within the territories that divide our societies. I begin my book, People, Power, and Profits, by asking, why is it that our standard of living and our life expectancies are so much higher than they were 250 years ago? Standards of living had stagnated for centuries, with incomes a little higher in 1750 than they had been 2,000 years earlier. The simple answer is the Enlightenment and Enlightenment ideals. We said that progress was possible, that we could use science to understand the world around us, and that through advances in social and political organization, such as you've been engaged in here in Europe, we could cooperate better. At the heart of these advances are institutions and processes through which we ascertain the truth. Cooperation is essential for our well-being, and cohesion is necessary for effective cooperation. For large democracies like the United States and EU, there is a need to have cohesion, territorial cohesion, across disparate parts of the territories. These disparities have, in fact, over the last 40 years, been increasing in many ways, and even when there has been progress in reducing them, the gaps, large gaps, remain. Without this heightened level of cooperation, our knowledge-based modern society would not have been possible, nor could the democracies that we cherish be sustainable. Underlying this cooperation were ideas like liberal democracy, basic human rights, checks and balances, and the rule of law. The pandemic has illustrated well the triumphs of Enlightenment ideas. In record time, we developed and tested powerful new vaccines and therapeutics based largely on publicly funded research and with the cooperation of scientists around the world. Cooperation between the public and private sector led to the rapid scaling up of production and the distribution of the vaccines within advanced countries. But the pandemic also illustrated the limitations of global social cohesion to the detriment of the well-being of all. Within many countries, anti-vaxxers refused to get vaccinated, and many refused to wear masks. They championed their own liberty, thereby putting the rest of society at risk. And many of the advanced countries showed an ugly vaccine nationalism. They hoarded vaccines and other COVID-19 products, not understanding that when the disease festers anywhere in the world, there is always the possibility of a more dangerous, contagious, or even vaccine-resistant mutation. Until everyone is safe, no one is safe. We needed to do everything in our power to ensure the rapid production and distribution of vaccines. We did not. There is little doubt in my mind that had we quickly adopted the vaccine intellectual property waiver when it was first proposed to the WTO in October 2020, fewer people would have been affected and fewer would have died. Our lack of cohesion did not serve our own interest. And it's likely that our lack of cohesion in addressing the economic aftermath of the pandemic also will not serve well our economic interests. Developing countries and emerging markets have not had the resources that advanced countries have had to resuscitate their economies, and many have been left with unmanageable levels of debt. Well, eventually, global social cohesion led to the issuance of $650 billion of SDRs. Advanced countries that don't need additional reserves have so far agreed to recycle too little of their allotments to the countries that desperately need those funds. The next natural question is why, until now, has there been so little social cohesion? Even now, within the United States and elsewhere, there are people who admire Putin. Why is nationalism and populism on the rise? Why, in spite of their proven successes, are Enlightenment ideals not universally supported? Economists naturally seek economic explanations, and those explanations do go a long way to enhancing our understanding of what has gone wrong and suggesting what we might do. For the past 40 years, advanced countries have experimented with neoliberalism, an economic approach that elevates the market above all else and denigrates collective action and the role of government. It embraces and elevates some parts of the Enlightenment ideals but neglects others. In the end, neoliberalism was a failure. Growth was lower than before, and the fruits of that limited growth went disproportionately to those at the top of the income ladder. There were many territories, many regions, many people that were left behind, a subject that has already been raised. The economy exhibited high levels of instability marked by the 2008 global financial crisis and the euro crisis. The capitalist system seemed rigged. Corporate power, greed, and exploitation ran rampant. Environmental deterioration sped up around the world. We could have used the improvements in economic efficiency that globalization and technological change had promised to ensure a shared prosperity and to advance the environmental agenda. But neoliberal ideology did just the opposite. It hollowed out the middle class and then hollowed out the welfare state just when we needed it the most. Growing economic disparities and increasing economic segregation, increasing territorial disparities in many advanced countries weakened social cohesion. In today's world, of course, we must think of cohesion not only within countries, but across countries, and across generations, and across time. Neoliberalism undermined all of these. In the euphoria that followed the collapse of communism, there was hope that we would all converge to liberal democracies and free market economies, with the two and economic well-being inextricably interlinked. And this excessive, perhaps even blind optimism led us to pay too little attention to the growing divides and alienations within our societies and to the excesses to which unfettered markets gave rise. Neoliberalism, with its short-sighted focus on narrowly defined budget deficits, led to underinvestment in protecting the environment, and with its short-sighted focus on deregulation, led to financial instability. Both threaten the well-being of future generations, weaken cohesion across generations and across territories. Austerity policies contributed to divergence. In short, neoliberalism undermined cohesion, divided societies, and left a fertile field on which populists and autocrats could sow the seeds of nationalism. This is of particular importance because a well-functioning economy can give rise to forces that can undermine cohesion if they aren't corrected. Market-driven innovation may increase GDP, but it may also increase disparities in market economies. Unfettered capitalism may create jobs and increase profits, but it may also lead to the exploitation of workers and to working conditions that no humane society would call acceptable. Too often, in too many places, this has happened, and neoliberal ideologies have inhibited the corrective collective action required. Ironically, modern economics has shown that even without these abuses, there is no presumption that either the pace or direction of innovation is optimal in market economies. We need to steer innovation and investment away from current directions that, to too large an extent, cause more unemployment and wage stagnation among unskilled workers, and towards socially desirable objectives like saving the planet. Thus, Europe's Green Deal and America's Build Back Better agenda are designed to simultaneously ensure that the money spent to recuperate the economy do double, triple duty, addressing at the same time the climate and inequality crises. These programs can successfully increase cohesion across and within generations and across and within countries, and prevent the climate change disaster which represents such an existential threat. To be clear, though, economics alone cannot explain all that has gone on, and it would be facile to expect that economic policies by themselves would heal the now deep divisions in our societies. The policies are necessary, but not sufficient. Even within Europe, some of the countries that have done relatively well have suffered the most from nationalism and populism. More curious is that among the strongest supporters of neoliberalism are citizens who have been its victims. Sometimes ideas and ideologies can be even more powerful than interest. But here's the rub. The right's ideology allowed for a disproportionate control of the media in many places by the very people who had a vested interest in propagating that ideology and in shaping politics to support it. Ideology, they realized, could be used to advance their interest even if it undermined social cohesion. Making matters worse were the advances in technology that led to social media, which enabled targeted messaging that enhanced the polarization of our societies, the antithesis of social cohesion. Indeed, polarization was part of the basic business model. In Europe, the Digital Marketing Act and the Digital Services Act, which the French presidency have been promoting, are essential steps in preventing further division, mitigating digital harms, and restoring a stronger sense of social cohesion. Advances in social sciences in the past decade has shown what is perhaps obvious, but was explicitly denied by the economic theories underlying neoliberalism. What we believe, our values, our preferences, are not fixed, but are shaped. They are shaped by our environment, our society, the people around us, our own experiences, and what we see and experience indirectly, including through the media. That's why media diversity is so important, and media controlled by the wealthy is so dangerous. The ideas and ideals of the Enlightenment underlie social cohesion, but too often we take them for granted. We don't realize that we must inculcate them in every generation. We sometimes associate propaganda with communism and fascism, but the nationalists and populists, and others opposed to the creation of a cohesive and open society based on Enlightenment ideals, have been waging a propaganda campaign for years now, using all the advances in marketing that technology and modern social sciences have provided. We have done too little to counter these narratives and ensure that everyone in our society understands the necessity of an inclusive and democratic social cohesion. We also have to ensure that citizens better understand the forces that undermine inclusive social cohesion and those that strengthen it. We need a comprehensive approach that recognizes how our policies shape our society and how our society shapes us in a never-ending evolutionary process. Neoliberalism and its policies not only led to the economic divides that so neatly lay the groundwork for nationalism and populism, but it also helped shape us, our attitudes, our beliefs, and perspectives. It said that greed was good and that the unencumbered pursuit of self-interest would lead to societal well-being. It treated labor as a commodity. It championed markets over other forms of social organization, competition over cooperation. Liberalism championed liberty without recognizing that in our interdependent society, one person's freedom is another person's unfreedom. A healthy civil society is critical for having constructive conversations about what a good society is and how to go about creating it. As Russia gradually transitioned out of communism, we too often let neoliberalism be our guide, with its emphasis on shock therapy, marketization, liberalization, privatization. Some were foolish enough to think that if we only got the economics right, a robust democracy would follow naturally. Through the policies we encouraged in that faithful transition, we in the West helped create the oligarchs whose interests never coincided with liberal democracy. By contrast, we should have done everything we could to create a robust civil society, focusing more on the democratic transition than on the economic transition. There will undoubtedly be a lot of soul-searching now and in the future. What might we have done differently? Was it ever possible that there be a democratic transition of the kind that the EU helped foster in so many countries? We will never know the answer for sure. We can't run the experiments that we would need to test the counterfactuals. To me, though, it is clear that we didn't do everything we could have done to enhance the chances of a democratic transition in Russia, and some of what we did reduced those chances. Today, we face quadruple crises: the war in Ukraine with its almost certain aftermath of a new Cold War, the climate crisis, the inequality crisis, and the pandemic. This is a critical moment, and we must use every tool at our disposal to increase societal cohesion and reduce disparities. There are several things we can do right now. Cohesion entails not only reducing current inequalities, but also a fair sharing of the burden of the challenges facing us, including those posed by the Ukrainian invasion. First, with some companies doing so well and some suffering from inflation, we must impose a temporary war and pandemic profiteering tax on companies taking advantage of the current circumstances to increase profits at a cost to others. I'm thinking especially of the large oil companies that own their own reserves. Their costs of production have hardly increased, but the prices have soared. The revenues raised by such a tax could be used to help lower and middle-income individuals face the increasing costs which they face. Some of the revenues should be used for rapid expansion of green energy and deployment of energy conservation investments. As we seek to tame energy prices, our objective should be the largest short-run impact consistent with the most positive or at least negative effect on long-run emissions. These multiple crises that I've spoken of are setting the stage for a true paradigm shift. Our future depends on greater social cohesion, economic cohesion, and doing everything we can to promote greater cohesion. These crises are also moments of reflection. What is it that really matters? The willingness of so many in Ukraine to risk their lives to maintain their democracy is a reminder of how precious and fragile our democracies and our human rights policies, our human rights are. So among the multiple tools we have at our disposal, some of which we are not using to the full extent that we could, our industrial policies. There's a need and a lot of discussion now of changing Europe's fiscal framework, its Growth and Stability Pact. These have posed a set of constraints, given rise to a set of policies which have actually impeded convergence and have expanded the disparities that exist, or at least reduced the speed with which they're reduced. Instead, the cohesion that Europe demonstrated in response to the pandemic, the 750 billion euro issuance of Eurobonds, has to be built upon with a far greater EU budget financed by environmental taxes, wealth taxes, a digital tax, a common corporate income tax that could simultaneously increase growth, improve efficiency, and attack the multiple crises that I referred to earlier. There are still other measures, like expanding the scope of the European Investment Bank, which has played a very important role in developing other industrial policies to promote the green and digital transitions. Such measures would advance common interest within the EU, including the common interest in reducing economic disparities. And this, in turn, would enhance cohesion, enhance the ability to cooperate that, as I said in the beginning of my talk, is so necessary for long-run economic success. I want to conclude my remarks with a few comments in a more personal capacity as an American who has witnessed the fraying of our democracy and recognizes the fragility with its global consequences. Increasingly, there is a recognition within the United States that we depend on Europe, that Europe is the bastion of human rights and democracy, and that at the center of Europe, we've had to turn to recognize that the support of climate change, which is cohesion across generations, and the support of basic human rights, ideals of democracy, are strong. When I was growing up, we always thought we invented democracy, is what we were told. We now realize, and it's very sad at my age to realize, that there were deep flaws in our Constitution, and that our Constitution was a compromise designed to maintain slavery, and that its design made changes in the Constitution very difficult. And the result of this is that, quite frankly, we do not know whether our democracy will survive. We hope it will. We are doing everything, those of us who are committed to this are doing everything to make sure that it does. But this kind of solidarity across the Atlantic is going to be very important in maintaining democracy in America. And I believe that the kind of cohesion that is now being shown in response to Ukraine is a building block on developing a real sustained cohesion for the support of democracy and human rights throughout the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Stiglitz. Thank you. Reminding us why cohesion matters so much, and a fascinating analysis of why there's been such a lack of it. We've been talking about how much cohesion, how much solidarity the EU showed within itself during the pandemic, but a question there, why so little on a global level? And how important it will be to tackle those multiple challenges you spoke about. You identified what you think we need to do right now, as you said, to tackle it and ensure people cannot exploit it. We will discuss that in more depth in our session today. Thank you so much. It's been a great honor to listen to you. I'm now delighted to welcome, joining us remotely, Carlota Perez, Honorary Professor at the Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose at University College London, and at SPRU, the Science Policy Research Unit at the University of Sussex. Professor Perez, great to have you with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and my apologies for not being able to accompany you in person. Despite the turbulent times we're living through, I would like to transmit a message of hope. I will begin by sharing with you two very important lessons I have learned from studying the history of technological revolutions. If we follow the processes of change since the dawn of capitalism in England in the late 18th century, it is clear that progress has occurred. We have come a long way from the satanic mills of early mechanization to a situation where many factory workers can own a house full of electrical appliances with a car at the door while their children go to college. However, such progress has not been continuous, and that is the first lesson. Progress has been uneven and unequal. It has happened by successive leaps in productivity brought by successive technological revolutions. Each revolution has brought new prosperity to some regions and countries, new wealth to new winners, and gradually new business giants. But each of these revolutions has at first brought turbulent times, the destruction of skills, jobs, industries, and even whole regions that were successful before. So greater equality has been reached only after going through periods of increasing inequality as we are experiencing now. The true leaps have occurred in what we usually refer to as the golden ages. The post-war boom, which the French call the glorious 30, the Belle Epoque at the turn of the 20th century, and the Victorian boom in mid-19th. Each has taken place when governments have given directionality to the new technologies, when they have tilted the playing field so that markets can act in a synergistic way in converging directions. They have also reversed much of the inequality through welfare mechanisms and also regulated new business giants to make sure that their power for wealth creation benefits wider layers of the population. That is how capitalism regains legitimacy after it has lost it. However, the other lesson I have learned about market economies is that they don't respond in advance. They mainly respond to crises. Although successful businesses are those that look ahead and innovate first, governments wait until crisis hits, until the situation becomes untenable before acting to solve it. No matter how much experts may warn of impending risk, change will not be made before reaching the precipice. Rebellion, resentment, populism, violence, even wars put the system in peril, and leaders finally emerge and act. We are reaching that moment now. But whereas violence can be quelled and inequality is reversible, climate change is not. This time, the urgency is greater than ever. The future of humanity is at stake. There is no time to lose. In essence, it could be said that real progress has occurred for successively larger portions of society, only when technological revolutions have been followed by socio-institutional revolutions. They are periods of win-win games between business and society, orchestrated by governments. And they all came after turbulent times. And I'm not exaggerating when I refer to an institutional revolution. The post-war golden age was shaped by suburbanization and the Cold War, involving government procurement, government innovation, social policies, going from unemployment insurance to public health and education, together with the strengthening of labor unions. Also included major international institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, the dollar of gold, the UN, where the enemy countries sat together, and also a Marshall Plan to reconstruct Europe. That whole framework is now weakened, and it's ready for revision and renewal. We are today in a multidimensional crisis that is calling for bold leadership. War, soaring energy costs, an increasingly tense multipolar world, a worldwide pandemic, unacceptable inequality within and between nations as fertile ground for populism, terrorism, and massive migrations, a global financial casino decoupled from the real economy and disconnected from the national economies, massive tax avoidance and money laundering, all in the context of the environmental emergency, already showing what can happen in terms of fires, floods, droughts, hurricanes, and other catastrophes. Yet, it is precisely because the situation is so dire and the urgency so blatant that there can be hope. And on this occasion, it is Europe that can lead the transformation towards the golden age of the information revolution, which could be smart, green, fair, and global. It's true that Europe did not lead the technological revolution of the information age, but it is the best place to lead the socio-institutional revolution required now. There are 4 reasons for this. First, although Europe is not the hegemon on the world stage, it is probably the most credible mediator. Second, it has already faced the complexities of multinational and multi-level governance and is still innovating. Third, since the late 19th century, Europe has been at the vanguard of innovation and social safety nets. As Stiglitz has just said, it is the model of democracy. And fourth, regarding the green transition, both the European Union and its member governments, as well as its population, have taken the green transition seriously and have been acting upon it. All this is important because the 3 areas where major institutional innovations are probably needed are multi-level governance, the redesign of the welfare state, and the promotion of green lifestyles. Forms of governance are needed to handle an economy that is both global and local. A new safety net is necessary for the intensity of technical change, the growth of self-employment, the gig economy, and lifetime learning. And new lifestyles are required for both social and environmental sustainability. They have always been the source of the new jobs. In what sense must supranational and global governance respond to the new situation? There are major differences between the international economy, that we have left behind, and the global economy we're trying to grapple with. Global finance and global business are out of reach of the national authorities. And the multilateral organizations were not designed to handle this new globalized reality. At a minimum, we need a global institution capable of collecting a financial transactions tax from international transfers, especially those that go to tax havens, to fund a Marshall Plan for green investment in the global south. It should be noted that full global development is not only a humanitarian goal. It can be pursued for very selfish reasons. It would generate demand for capital goods, engineering, and other high-tech services, creating jobs in the global north. It would also reduce migrations. But at best, some aspects of financial regulation could and should be handled at the global level. Otherwise, it will be a race to the basement. At the lower end of devolution, there is the governance at the local level. The hyper-segmentation of markets into mass-produced commodities at one end and long tails of specialized and customized products and services in small quantities at the other makes it possible for every locality, every community to identify one or more vocations and set a development strategy. This implies institutional innovations to handle stakeholder participation and consensus building in the community. And at the start, just as with entrepreneurs, it will require providing support in terms of human capabilities and finance. That is exactly what the European Union is now doing. Finally, regarding innovation in governance, there is the modernization of procedures. The digital economy has provided powerful tools for simple, transparent, and agile operation. It is not about computerizing the traditional practices and putting them on the web. Rather, as in the most advanced corporations, stiff bureaucratic rules would be reduced to a minimum. Services to citizens would be as easy, efficient, and seamless as those of Amazon. Information technology, including artificial intelligence, would be used to simplify standard procedures and concentrate on the creative tasks, on the achievement of missions, following Mariana Mazzucato's lead, and the pursuit of development strategies. The second area of urgent institutional innovation is the welfare state. The obvious fact that jobs for life is no longer the normal expectation makes obsolete the notion of unemployment insurance. Self-employment and the gig economy, plus lifetime learning, create new circumstances. Whether it is universal basic income, using automatically charged debit cards for everyone, with the amount returned by taxes by those who earn enough, or if it is some other system. It looks like some form of pre-distribution makes more sense in the new conditions. And given that education is becoming the most important asset, policies that favor it and support it, similar to the ones applied to support home ownership, need to be designed. It used to be that governments practically backed up mortgages and taxes are not paid on mortgage payments. Going much further, inadequate social support, the work of Hillary Cottom shows interesting directions. Finally, and perhaps most importantly for both the green transition and the creation of new employment, there is the promotion of a European way of life to replace the consumerist, wasteful, and untenable American way of life, which was so well suited to the previous mass production revolution. Historically, many of the lost jobs lost to technology were compensated in the golden ages by the demands of the new lifestyles. The urban lifestyle of the Victorian boom required infinite new services in retail, house decoration, clothing, education, and so on. The cosmopolitan lifestyle of the Belle Epoque created innumerable jobs in the new systems of transportation, entertainment, communications, advertising, restaurants, cafes, music halls, etc. The suburban lifestyle of the post-war boom required countless products for the all-electric home, as well as multiple services from retail, banking, and real estate to health, education, and others. If we look at the trends being followed by the young and the educated, we see an emerging lifestyle centered on health, exercise, creativity, nutrition, learning, networking, and so on. This is how it has historically been. The technologies offer the new possibilities, and the pioneers set the trend. A new aspirational way of life emerges, which in turn influences the technologies and business, creating new demands along the new space of the possible. Government policies then reinforce the trends and facilitate further diffusion. We are now facing three job-destroying and job-displacing forces: technology, globalization, and the green transition. They could all be turned into job-creating if handled intelligently. The creativity of digital technologists can be moved away from games, NFTs, the metaverse, and other escapist endeavors, and aimed at crucial social needs, such as health, education, care, and the green transition. Some ways of facing the environmental challenges are job-destroying. Others are job-creating. We can always begin by the latter. Just imagine bringing back maintenance and shifting from possession to rental of durable goods. It would imply doing digital diagnosis and 3D printing of spare parts. None would be produced for inventory, only on demand. People could change models as often as they wish, and enter at the bottom of the consumption ladder would cost very little. Every product would have a chip with its history, and all maintenance information would be online. Policies forbidding disposal in municipal garbage sites and an obligation to take products back when damaged would open the opportunity for rental companies. Jobs would multiply in the countries where the goods are produced and in the countries where the goods are consumed. Millions of jobs, and every family in the world could have access to a refrigerator without needing new materials. The tasks ahead are both enormous and exciting. Europe can be the stage where the institutional innovations are tested and turned into the model for the rest of the planet. It is a leadership opportunity that can bring a better world. It will be making history. Thank you, and I wish you a very successful meeting.
Thank you so very much, Professor Perez, for that very stark, but also very eloquent reminder of the consequences if we fail to meet these challenges in the right way. You set out very clearly some of those issues you feel need to be addressed and how they need to be addressed if we are to get there. We will come back to that in our discussion, and particularly your point at the end there about turning those job-destroying challenges, like the green transition, into job opportunities. Lots to discuss. We are immensely grateful to you for providing us and to Professor Stiglitz with such inspiration as we start our second day of discussions. Thank you very much indeed. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to move to the first, in a moment, of our panels. We have a panel this morning on the green transition and a panel this afternoon on the digital. So let's first turn to the European Green Deal, a just and fair transition. And could I invite our speakers in this session who are with us in the audience to come and join me on the stage?